looking at Song of Solomon, chapter 1, as mentioned. We'll begin at verse 9. I'll read verses 9 through 11 and give some introduction, some comments and all. And we'll be looking at these verses today. So allow me to begin reading here in Song of Solomon in chapter 1 at verse 9. I'll read to verse 11. We'll get into our study. I've compared you, my love, to my filly among Pharaoh's chariots. Your cheeks are lovely with ornaments, your neck with chains of gold. And we will make you ornaments of gold with studs of silver. Okay, so what we've done is we've begun to study here in the Old Testament book, Song of Solomon. And this particular book, as I mentioned in our introduction, relates to romance as well as to marriage. And the book is centered on King Solomon, a young King Solomon, and a young woman, a Shulamite woman that is unnamed. I mentioned to you, just for an introduction, I mentioned to you that this book is actually divided into three basic sections. Chapter 1 to chapter 3, verse 5 is going to describe their courtship, and I'm dealing with that as if it's a dating. In chapter 3, verse 6 to chapter 5, verse 1, it speaks concerning their marriage. And then chapter 5, verse 2 to the end of the book speaks of the maturing of their marriage. And so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to be approaching it as in dating, marriage, and then after marriage. Now, there are many questions concerning who this young lady may be. There are many theories that are held, but one thing seems to stand out. This young woman that's mentioned is Solomon's first and truest love. And what we're going to see in this book is that Solomon obviously loves this young woman, this young Shulamite woman. And as a man in love, he's openly admiring her beauty, and he speaks about it very unselfconsciously. In chapter 4, verse 1, for example, it says, "Behold, you are fair, my love, you are fair." The word fair, you're beautiful. He admires her beauty, he makes it very clear, but he especially values her character. Later on in chapter 6, verse 9, he says, "My dove, my perfect one, is unique. She is her mother's only daughter. She is the pure child of the one who gave birth to her." The young women saw her and called her blessed, the queens and the concubines also, and they praised her. So she's a beautiful woman with character. And so Song of Solomon is a love song. It clearly reveals the bride and the groom, and it reveals that they're deeply in love. And so as we go through this particular book, we're going to learn a lot of things about love and romance. And the wisdom that's found here is going to help all of us from the unmarried to the battle-scarred veterans that many of us are. So I want to make it a practical study. And I'll begin by saying in American culture, marriage is normally something that follows dating. We don't have arranged marriages. We choose the one we're going to marry. We choose them ourselves. And the commitment from beginning to date to engagement in marriage is one that develops over time because we have to get to know one another. And so normally when we date, we begin to express our feelings. And that's what Solomon is doing. He's actually opening his heart to this beautiful young woman. He refers to her, as you know, he refers to her as my love. He actually uses this particular term 5 times in this book. And he lets her know how he cares deeply about her. So how does he do that? How can we as men learn to express our feelings? Many of us are very closed with our feelings. How can we learn from this man, Solomon, how to express our love for somebody? And so we begin by seeing how he begins in verse 9. In verse 9, he says, "I've compared you, my love, to my filly among Pharaoh's chariots." And so how did this man show he loves her? Well, he calls her a horse. "My love, you're as beautiful as a horse." He's very charming. And so when you think that, well, wait a minute. Now, well, when he says that, and I'll develop this in a moment a little bit further, but that's actually a term of endearment. Today we may use different words. We may say honey or baby girl or mama. chunky monkey. I mean, we may use various words that show that we are attracted, but he gives her the highest compliment. He says, "You're like my horse." Now, a filly is a female horse, and what Solomon is actually saying, and this again is an ancient way of designating value and all, he's simply saying you're beautiful to behold. He was a man who is known for being a horseman, and he valued their beauty, and because the Egyptian pharaoh's chariots were famous and were celebrated for their beauty, and because they were impressive, known for their courage and their strength, he is using that as a picture, and in essence he's saying, your excellence and your strength and your beauty overwhelms me. That's what he's saying. And so he's pointing out that not only is she beautiful, but he also speaks concerning the way that she is actually dressed, the way she is adorning herself. Verse 10, your cheeks are lovely with ornaments, your neck with chains of gold. And so he begins to speak concerning the rows of jewels that are fastened on top of her head and are draping down to her cheek. The chains of gold that she's wearing are draped around her neck. And so what he's saying is, your attire, the way you dress, attracts me. And so Solomon is attracted to her. She's a beautiful woman, and he wants to know her much better. You're dazzling. He notices her cheeks. He notices her neck. I'm taken by you, and I want to get to know you. I want to know you better. So in a practical way, as he's pointing out that he's seeing her and praising her concerning these things, the excellence of her character and her beauty, what is it that attracts us as men to women today? Well, obviously, the first thing that every man will say is her looks. There are those who've been surveyed, and men have been asked, what is it that you find that first attracts you? And they'll say things like beauty, their smile, their kindness, their humor, their intelligence, their communication skills, her hair. This Shulamite woman is attractive. And that's the point. And he's making it clear to her. So to make it a little more practical, I'll personalize it. When I met the girl who became my wife, when I met Marie, there were things about her that I found attractive. I liked her smile. I liked her eyes, and I liked her laughter. I was very attracted to her attitude because she had this little snottiness about her. I'll say it like that. I don't know a better way to say it. She thought she was all that, and I liked her, I thought that was attractive, and I liked her humor. I didn't know her. I mean, I met her. She came to a Bible study. My brother introduced her to me, and she didn't come the next week. Then she came the following week. So I had just met her. I'd only spoken to her for a few minutes. So the third week after getting to know her, in the third week, I thought I'd mess around with her. I'm one of those guys that a lot of ladies don't like. I like to tease. And if I like you or whatever, I'll kind of tease with you. That's what I do. And so I thought I would tease with her. And so I don't know her. She's come to one Bible study. She's there at the second one. Now, my brother's Bible study, where we held it in Ontario, was a little front room. You would be sitting by the door where I would teach. The door was right next to me. And you would take maybe 6 or 7 steps, maybe 8, and you're in the kitchen. I mean, it's very small. It was like maybe 600 square feet, 7 maybe at the most. It was very small, one bedroom with one bathroom and all, and very small front room kitchen that was combined in. Also, Marie's maybe 30 feet away from me, and she's standing next to the refrigerator. Again, I didn't know her, but I thought I'd mess with her. So I looked at her and I said, Marie. And I went like that. Marie. And she doesn't know. So I said, Marie. She looks at me. I said, I drink root beer. And I gave her this, I drink root beer. And she goes, what? I said, I don't think you heard me. I drink root beer. And I'm giving her this kind of attitude, right? Just to see what she'll do. She goes to the refrigerator, gets a can of root beer out, gets a glass, puts ice in it, opens up the can, brings it to me, hands me the glass, pours the root beer, and says, your root beer, Your Majesty. That's a keeper. I loved it because she wasn't one of these, because, today what is accepted wasn't accepted back then, this attitude, she played along with me, and I was very attracted to that. I said, good, I can mess with this girl. I've been doing it for a long time, and it's just the way that's the way I show her how much I love her. I play with her a lot, and so that's something that is very attractive. So there were things that were involved. And again, I'm trying to make this practical from a personal point of view. Forgive me if it sounds like I'm just speaking about my relationship, but it's the best relationship I know. And so those are the kinds of things that began to combine that caused me within a month and a half or two to consider, to think about asking her out. And from the first date she and I had to this day, I have never gone out with anyone else. That was the last date I ever had as a single man. This last date with a girl that I ever had as a single man. She's been the only one that I've dated ever since. Now, there are those today who think dating's a sport of some sort. They go out because they get bored. And they're not thinking that this person that they're going out with is going to end up their spouse or anything. They're just going out. So for them, dating or going out is just something that you do. It's something that just occupies their time. And many put off marriage because, well, they're not ready. They're not financially ready, we'll say, or they just haven't felt comfortable, discovered the right person. They feel they're too young to settle down and all. So as I was thinking about that, I began to look at a little recent research, and there's a growing number who are remaining unmarried. And what they're doing is they're simply choosing to live together. The Pew Research Center reports that 69% of Americans say that living together or cohabitation, we used to simply call it shacking, is acceptable. Approximately 70% of couples live together before marriage here in the United States. 70%, 7 out of 10 prefer to cohabit before marriage. Now, 66% of those who had been surveyed believe that cohabitation is a step toward marriage. They use it as part of their quote-unquote courting or dating relationship. So they meet, they begin to have relationships, they decide we'll live together and maybe we'll get married. But here's something you might want to know. Couples who live together before marriage have a higher divorce rate. Now, Americans find it acceptable, shacking up, living together, cohabiting, whatever you want to call it. Americans consider that to be okay. It's acceptable to Americans today. And you hear it's very common. You don't even think about it anymore. But God does not find it acceptable. The Bible makes it very clear that He calls it something other than just living together or cohabiting. He calls it fornication. And there are many scriptures in the scriptures, and Hebrews 13 verse 4 being one of them, that point that out. In the book of Hebrews chapter 13 verse 4, it says, marriage is to be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept undefiled, because God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterers. Though the world may consider shacking up, cohabiting, okay, God says, no, you're going to be judged for it. That's called sexual sin. Now, others will wait, and some of them are waiting later and later now. They wait until their 30s to get married. A recent Urban Institute report even predicts that a significant number of millennials will remain unmarried past the age of 40. According to data from the U.S. Census Bureau, the median average age for men to first get married has risen to 30 years of age in 2023, while for women, it's 28 years of age. My mom got married when she was 16. My dad when he was 20. Not anymore. They're waiting longer and longer. Now, with the quote-unquote women's liberation movement came a relaxing of what is called sexual mores, and that gave rise to men having access to physical intimacy without the need for marriage. So physical intimacy wasn't tied to commitment, so there's no need to get married. According to Psychology Today, women are more likely to initiate divorce than men, with 70% of women being the one who files for divorce. Now, since women often are the first to initiate divorce, men have begun to rethink marriage. Can we make it? Is it worth it? And what do I get out? What do I gain from getting married? Someone said, I'd like to get married, but I don't want to bet half my stuff on it. And so for those who are desiring a traditional family, dating teaches us about relationships. Dating teaches us how to behave with someone of the opposite sex. Dating helps us to put into practice the things our parents tried to teach us. Use table manners. Show courtesy to your date. Meet the parents. Meet the family. And after a few failures, you usually discover things that work and things that don't. And eventually, dating ceases being novel, and you begin to think of the long run. This especially happens when you realize that you actually want to marry. And so, when you begin to discover that, you begin to do something as a believer that's very important. You begin to pray, and you ask God for direction in this. So how do you know? How will you know when you are with the right one? Well, normally it comes by spending time together. So advice would be, spend time together, but don't spend every day together. Don't spend hours at a time together on a daily basis. You get too close too fast. You begin to think that you're much further on in a relationship than you actually are. Just because you're spending hours with that person and getting to know some things about them doesn't mean you're getting to know that person, because we as men especially, I would assume that it could be both ways. We can put on what we want for as long as we want until the prize is won. And just because you're being with somebody every day and getting to know them doesn't mean you're really getting to know them. So be very careful about that. Don't spend a whole lot of time. Don't get too close too soon. And if you feel pressured to spend too much time together, that's not a healthy sign. So ask yourself this person that you're getting to know, do they constantly message you? Do they demand attention and time? Do you go out with them and drop them off, and on your way home, all of a sudden you're getting a text message? What are you doing? Are you thinking of me? I'm thinking of you. Are we thinking of each other? No, you're psycho. Leave me alone. Don't do that. Don't spend too much time together. It's not healthy. Relationships need time to process what is actually taking place. So try to objectively see them for what they really are. And be careful not to fall for the flattery. Oh, you're the most, I can't even put into words. You're so, awesome. Be careful. Oh, is that a new perfume? Oh, your hair's so nice. Shut up. That's stupid. People who use flattery are setting you up to break you down very often. Skepticism is a good thing to apply to compliments. In Proverbs 29:5, it says, "A man who flatters his neighbor is spreading a net for his feet." And somebody once said, flattery is like chewing gum. Enjoy it, but don't swallow it. So notice how they act in groups. Are they friendly? Are they outgoing? Or are they shy Are they withdrawn? Be aware of what they say about your friends and what they tell you they feel about your friends. Do they try to keep you away from them so they can be with you? Do they try to control your friendships? Be careful with that. Do they go through your phone, read your text messages, see who you're up talking to, and then question you about that? That may be flattering at first, but that's controlling. It's crazy. You don't need that. Not only that, be on the alert as to whether or not they want to meet your parents. And be aware of whether they want to spend time with your family. Now, for me, again, the girl I was dating, Marie, after several months of dating, wanted me to meet her parents, and I didn't want to. Because for me, if I have to meet your dad and your mom, no. Why? I'm not dating them. Why do I want to know your daddy? I'm your daddy. No, why do I want, why would I want to meet your parents? I was very, very like that. I already had failed a couple times to impress the parents. So I didn't want to put myself in the position of giving the impression that I was more serious than I was, because I was still working through whether I was feeling anything or not. And Marie, by that time, began to feel a little more committed towards me. How could you help it, baby? She began to feel more committed to me. And I was still kind of wrestling with it, whether, I'm not sure. So she said, will you meet my dad and mom? And I was about to leave to go for 3 months. So I was going to go to Europe. I backpacked Europe for 3 months. And I was about to leave, and I had long hair. So what I did is I went and had a perm, a real tight Jimi Hendrix perm. So I had this huge 1,000-watt light bulb head. And my hair was reddish brown. She would call me Raggedy Andy. And so I didn't want to meet her parents. And so her sister, Patty, was graduating high school. And so we went, and we didn't actually get into the Chino High School field or anything. We sat outside. And now the graduation's over, and we're sitting at the curb. I still remember this, and Marie turns to me, and she says, now we can go to to meet my parents. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And she says, but you said you would. And I said, it's not that I won't. I will someday, perhaps, but I don't want it today. She said, but you said you would. And I said, so what? I said, so, people say a lot of things. I don't want to. She used woman kung fu on me. She started to cry. You can't do that. That's unfair. That's unfair. So I had to go meet her dad and mom just because I had said I would, and because it bothered her. And I still remember walking into the house the first time, and my father-in-law to-be came and sat across the table from me. And I'll still remember, we were talking about this the other day, the two questions. First questions he asked me. First question, what's your last name? So I told him, that's a normal thing. Told him my last name, and he looks at me. A few minutes later, he says, you want a beer? And I said, no, sir, I don't drink. I became his boy because he didn't want some guy taking his girl out trying to get her drunk. And because I didn't drink, I was a safe bet for him. That was our first encounter. I encountered her family, met her father, met her mama, and all. And that was an important step. Maybe not, well, for me it was very important. For Marie, it was, I think she just wanted to be courteous to her parents because I want to know who she's going out with. And so watch those kinds of things. If that person does not want to meet your family, they may be telling you it's too soon, or I'm not really that committed. So what you have to do is go out with them for a while, start picking up on some of the personal things about how do they handle their money? How do they go about normal life? These are things that are really important to pick up, and it takes time for you to do that. And as you're doing it, you're going to begin to define your relationship. You see, in a short amount of time, you're going to know whether this is an exclusive relationship or not. With me, I saw Marie. I saw her once a week at my Bible study. I never called her on the phone. I don't like talking on the phone to this day. I don't like to talk on the phone. So I never called her up. I would just give her a ride home from the study. I'd say, you want to go out Friday? You want to go out Saturday? And she said yes. And so she was free to continue her life, to go out. If she wanted to go out with her friends, that's fine with me. You want to go out with some guy? I don't care. Go out. That's fine. I didn't have any problem with that. I had no possessiveness. I didn't own this woman. She had her own life, and she had the right to decide who she wanted to be with. I'm not going to control that. So I'd take her out. Now, to give it some context, this was when the disco fever was going. So Marie liked to go to dance clubs. And again, she's a new Christian. I'm not controlling her life. You go to the Bible study, you learn some things, you begin to form into the image of Christ. And I'm not going to tell you what to do, what not to do. God will do that. God will help. And when we're more committed, then we'll be able to influence each other in a deeper way. I got that even then. But she liked to dance. Now, me, I'm not a dancer. I don't like to dance. That's not my thing. So I wouldn't even, I didn't think about it. I wasn't really yet committed that deeply. But I still remember we were driving. We drove by some dance place. And she looks at me and she goes, I was there last night. I went dancing. And I said, okay. She goes, yeah. Some guy asked me for my phone number. And I said, well, that's what they do. So I said, well, that's nice. Did you give it to him? She goes, no. I said, why not? I told him I have a boyfriend. I was shocked. I'm not kidding. I remember doing it real, and I'm not arguing this. I went, you have a boyfriend? I was blown away. I really didn't know that. You've got a boyfriend? She goes, yeah. I said, you do? Who? She goes, you. I'm not your boyfriend. I said, I'm not your boyfriend. Yes, you are. No, I'm not your boyfriend. She goes, yes, you are. I said, no. If I was your boyfriend, you wouldn't have been there dancing last night. She never went out again after that. Did I tell her not to? No. I just said, this is how it is. If you want to go dancing, dance. You want to have a relationship with me? Make your choice. See, so I never forced her. To this day, I never did. She makes decisions based on who we are together. That's relationship. That's relationship. I don't control my wife. I influence her. And my wife influences me. And the things that are pleasing to the Lord and to us, this is what we do. And we learn that over the years. So you have to see, is this person a controller? Is this person demanding from you? No. When you're dating, another thing that I'd advise is make sure that you often go out with groups, other dating friends, and be aware that if you go out with married friends, you can begin to feel like you're a married couple. Make sure that you're not going out with married friends all the time. And it's a good practice to remain in public places when you're together. Going alone to their home or apartment isn't a good idea. It's not difficult to give in to temptation under proper circumstances. And remember Romans 13:14, where Paul said, make no provision for the flesh to fulfill its lusts. You can enter into compromising situations very easily. Now, in your relationship, show proper value for one another. You see, when you're with somebody who values you, value means that they're respecting you. And my advice to those who are dating, and remember, I'm giving you steps in dating, then we'll talk about marriage and all of that. My advice is don't waste time on someone who's trying to move you into a compromising position. Pressure to conform you to their will is never good in any form that it's expressed. And so be aware of those things. You see, when we see that he's comparing her to a filly, he's actually saying something else. Pharaoh had a white horse. You could see it for miles. But this white horse that he's speaking about was reserved exclusively for him. So he's saying, you are exclusively mine, and you are beyond price in your value to me. So in your dating relationship, you should have one that causes you to know that you have value. How does that happen? Well, it comes through simple acts. It comes through kind things, thoughtfulness. It comes through courtesy and sincere compliments. Now, the great theologian Steve Harvey wrote a book called Think Like a Man. In it, he spoke of the chirp, chirp girl. How many of you have ever heard of the chirp, chirp girl? I'm really, okay, interesting. You're not scholarly. One. What's a chirp, chirp girl? Well, she's the girl who puts up with a man who uses his key fob to unlock the door of the car. Chirp, chirp. As he's heading for the driver's side, and he expects her to open the passenger side door for herself. She's a chirp, chirp girl. Chirp, chirp. Door opens, she climbs in. Marie and I, again, going back to just our experience together, I took her out. In our early days, we were dating. We went to a very exclusive restaurant that used to be in Ontario called Bob's Big Boy. I'm a spender. What can I say? We went to get a burger. And I remember pulling up. I had a Volkswagen. I remember pulling up and climbing out and walking and waiting by the back bumper on the passenger side. I waited for her to get out, and she wouldn't get out. So I walked up to her door, and I said, let's go. She says, I'm not getting out until you open my door. I said, I'm going in. I'm getting a burger. If you want to join me, I'll be in one of the booths. She says, I'm not getting out. What's wrong with you? So I opened the door, and she gets out. I thought that was the cutest, stupidest thing that we've ever... And I thought, I like this. She never allowed me to treat her with disrespect. She wasn't a chirp, chirp girl. She said, no, you open my door. You treat me like a lady. And those are the things that impressed me about her. She knew who she was. Yeah, I could play with her to a point, and I did. I teased with her. But I knew she had limits, and I knew she expected certain things. And so this man, Solomon, respects her. He respects her. She's beautiful. She wears ornaments, even as it says, gold and studs of silver. She's beautiful, takes care of herself. And she moves on here. The Shulamite begins to speak, and at verse 12, continuing, says, while the king is at his table, my spikenard sends forth its fragrance. A bundle of myrrh is my beloved to me, that lies all night between my breasts. My beloved is to me a cluster of henna blooms in the vineyards of En-Gedi. What are you talking about? Well, notice she calls Solomon her beloved. She uses that phrase 24 times. And the point that she's making is very simple. She made herself as attractive as she could, but she made herself attractive for him alone. The perfumes that she's speaking about are intended to communicate something about her to him. It's going to provide memory. There are those who do studies on memory, and they will point out that your memory is very much attached to the sense of smell. And so the perfumes that she's wearing are registering memories in him. Again, when Marie and I began to date, she wore Chanel number 5. Now she wears Channel 1, but she wore Chanel number 5. And that was so that he might see and remember her by that. Verse 13 speaks about this bundle. It's a perfumed bag, a sachet of myrrh. And she says, this bundle is my beloved, to me that lies all night. Myrrh was used for many purposes, including as an aromatic perfume. And what that's really speaking about is that she is constantly aware of him, and she has an undivided heart toward him. In verse 14, when she says, my beloved is to me a cluster of henna blooms in the vineyards of En-Gedi, our guide yesterday was pointing out that this henna blooms that they're speaking about in En-Gedi was extremely valuable. It was an extremely valuable scent. And henna blooms produce flowers that have an extremely beautiful smell. So she's saying, thinking of him is refreshing to her like the fragrance of flowers. So she's speaking concerning memories that they've developed. And then she says in verse, then it says in verse 15, behold, you are fair, my love. Behold, you are fair. You have dove's eyes. All right. Dove's eyes. Again, he likes horses and birds. A dove's eyes are regarded as beautiful. During that day, they were an image of purity and simplicity. So what he's saying is, in this poetic way, you're a woman I respect. I respect you because you have purity and gentleness. And so, fellas, here's just a real quick piece of advice. Be careful not to go out with someone with anger issues. Be careful. In Proverbs 21, verse 9, it says, better to dwell in a corner of a housetop than in a house shared with a contentious woman. Be very careful. You don't want to be under the control of somebody who's always angry, because anger can control you. And if you start seeing this, male or female, really, that they have uncontrollable bursts of anger, not a good relationship, and no, you're not going to make them better. You can think that you will, but you're not. Unless they choose to be something else, your influence is going to not be as effective as you may think. So be aware of that. So he's saying you have purity, you have simplicity. I'm attracted to you because you have very gentle ways. In verse 16, the Shulamite says, behold, you're handsome, my beloved. Yes, pleasant. Also, our bed is green, the beams of our houses are cedars, and our rafters of fir. You're handsome and appealing to me. Now, when she speaks of bed, our bed is green. Bed is a reference to a couch that was used outdoor. It was for outdoor sitting. They would even take naps in the afternoon on an outdoor patio type bed. It's not speaking concerning a bed in a house. This was something that was open, that would be seen by all. So it doesn't have a sexual connotation. When it says the beams of our houses in verse 17 are cedar, our rafters are of fir, well, the cedars and trees, they make a canopy, and it's a picture of a peaceful romantic setting. She's saying, I'm comfortable with you, and together we make memories. So when we have our time together, we're making memories that will last for a lifetime. So here's another piece of advice. If you're in a dating relationship, notice where you end up going. You know, movies and concerts and plays, you know, some of them are fine and all of that. But that doesn't make it possible for you to really get to know the person. You don't really have the opportunity to talk a lot and get to know each other if all you ever do is go to a movie or a play or a concert. You have to make time. Marie and I had our first date. I picked her up, and it was at 11. I got there about 10:45. A friend of mine and I, he brought a date, and I went to pick up Marie, our very first date. I still remember I walked in, knocked on the apartment she was living in, and her roommate opened the door, and I told him, what are you doing here? No, her roommate was a girl. Just kidding. Anyway, shouldn't have said that. Anyway, the roommate opened the door, and I went in, and Marie was curling her hair, and on her side of her neck was a red mark. And I looked. Chirp, chirp. No, I looked. And I said, I really don't know this girl. I don't know if I want to go out with somebody who's got a hickey. So she says, the first thing she says, I burned myself with my curling iron. I said, yeah, sure you did. So I didn't say anything. I just, okay. So I waited to see if it would scab up. It did. So you passed. And so we went out, and we spent the day together until from 11 o'clock until 11 that night. 12 hours with another couple, drinking tea, visiting, getting to know each other, and we spent 12 hours talking, actually longer talking. We still do to this day. We still do to this day. Marie and I talk constantly about everything on our mind together. We've been doing it for all of these years. That's why I can tell you I know my wife, because we talk. We ask questions of each other from the beginning to even to this day. And so don't be going to places that you're in the dark watching a movie or a play or hearing music, then you drive home and you haven't had any time. Be very aware of that. She's speaking about the time that they're together, making memories together. Moving on into chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, I am, the Shulamite woman says, the rose of Sharon, the lily of the valleys. And Solomon says, like a lily among thorns, so is my love among the daughters. And so she begins by simply saying, I'm a rose of Sharon, a lily of the valley. Those are common flowers in Israel. So she's speaking with humility. When she speaks of that lily of the valley, she's saying, I've grown up in a quiet rural life. I enjoy the peacefulness of such a life. And in this rural setting, there are many ordinary flowers. She's simply saying, I'm one of them. But Solomon responds in verse 2 by saying, like a lily among thorns, so is my love among the daughters. You may humbly consider yourself to be common, but not to me. For Solomon, she's the most beautiful and desirable woman in the world. So by saying this, Solomon is making her feel beautiful because he sincerely believes that she was. Here's something, fellas, that you probably already know. Daters, you'll learn this if you haven't. A woman often comes to understand her value by what is said to her and of her. The way you are spoken to is all that you need in order to reveal the relationship. And if you're with someone, listen carefully, who constantly criticizes and corrects you, that's not healthy. In Proverbs 12:18, there is one who speaks rashly like the piercing of a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Your words can hurt a person until they feel stupid and ugly and useless. And our words as Christians are to be used to encourage and build each other up. Ephesians 4:29, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. There are guys and women, there are people who know how to use their words to control people. And so be aware of that. You may be being controlled by hurtful things that are being said. Like an apple tree among the trees of the woods, verse 3, so is my beloved among the sons. I sat down in his shade with great delight, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. So I'm comfortable. You see, an apple tree, when it's speaking of an apple tree, just for a bit of information, the word apple here is more than likely not the apple that we know. It's more than likely an apricot. Why? Because this is a dry and arid environment, and apples don't go well in hot climates. And so this is probably an apricot. But she's saying, you're pleasant to me. You provide something that is deeply satisfying. And when she says in verse 3, this is an important phrase, I sat down in his shade with great delight. Again, you're in a very hot climate, and the shade provides comfort for you, so she feels comfortable and protected by him. She's not afraid of him, and she's not unsettled by him. He's a powerful man. And women, most women to this day, want to have a powerful man, a protective man. She doesn't want to have to be the one protecting him. She wants to have someone that she feels comfortable with who can protect her, and that's what's happening. And he's very pleasant and all, and he's saying, I have personal discipline, and I will protect her. And so when she's saying, I sat down in his shade, I'm comfortable with him, I'm not afraid of him. He protects me. He's somebody that I can have a relationship. And when it says in verse 4, he brought me to the banqueting house, his banner over me was love. This is something else that I'll pick up and share about later on in greater detail. But when it says he brought me to the banqueting house, his banner, well, the banner was used in a variety of ways, including a wedding canopy. So his love for her is pure. It's what you used to call the marrying kind of love. And the banner is open, so his love for her is openly declared. In other words, our relationship is open for everybody to see. It's a public relationship. It's a relationship that is lived out in full view of others. And so, ladies, if a man loves you, this is so basic, but if a man loves you, he is willing to be seen with you. If he introduces you in your early days of dating and all, if he says, this is so-and-so, or this is my friend, he just told you something. He's saying this isn't going any further. If he refers to you as my girlfriend, he's, very often, not always, he may be just using that as flattery, but if it naturally flows into that, then he's telling you something else. When Marie and I began to date, for the first several months, I would introduce her as Marie. This is my friend Marie. I was saying to her, I haven't committed myself to anything deeper than friendship. And so this is where it's at with us. The day came when I would put my arm around her and I'd say, this is my Marie. This is my girlfriend. And I was openly declaring that. And that's what she's saying. His banner over me is love. It's open. People know what he feels towards me. It's a wedding canopy. We're moving towards marriage. So, the only time I started to say to her, she's my girl, is when I got serious. I remember we were dating, and I'm going late. I'll ask the pastor, can I go for a few more minutes? Sure, why not? Okay. Ladies, let me show you something evil about me. I asked her this question, true story. I said, Marie, if I were to ask you to marry me, what would you say? She got all quiet and shy. I'd say yes. I said, cool. If I ever decide to ask you, now I know the answer. I really did that. So hate me if you'd like, but it's true. She was kind of vulnerable. And me, I was a jerk. And then she finally proposed, and I said yes. No. So watch out the way they act and talk. And I better close this quickly. Sustain me, verse 5, with cakes of raisins. Refresh me with apples. I'm lovesick. His left hand is under my head. His right hand embraces me. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or by the does of the field, do not stir up nor awaken love until it pleases. I'll have to collapse this. I'll pick up next time and give a little bit more. There's no avoiding this. She's speaking of a physical attraction to him. Raisins and apples were thought to produce fertility as well as increased sexual desire. Now, apple here, once again, the Hebrew doesn't always translate the exact words that we today use. Apple is better translated pomegranate. And a pomegranate is a picture of fruitfulness. But she's saying, I desire intimacy with him. I love this man passionately. I want him to touch me. I'm looking forward to him holding me, is what she's saying. And that's proper. That's proper for somebody who loves somebody and wants to marry them. But notice her charge in verse 7. She makes it very clear, do not stir up nor awaken love until it pleases. She speaks concerning the gazelles, the does. They were gentle, but they were easily awakened. Since they're gentle, a man should treat a woman with gentleness, but he should not be waking up desires in her until it's proper. There's a proper place for sexual expression, she's saying. Do not awaken love too soon. Sex is good. It is created by God to be enjoyed, as well as producing children. But it's not good when it's performed outside of the covenant of marriage. Men normally don't view physical intimacy in the same way that a woman does. For a man, it's just something he does. For a woman, normally, not always, and today it's changed a bit, I think at least verbally, for a woman, it at one time was more of an intense commitment. Why? Because the man can go about physical intimacy and leave. She may end up pregnant. She took a chance that he wasn't willing to take, didn't have to take. So he takes advantage of it. But for her, it's a warning. She says, don't awaken love until it's proper. That comes in marriage. You'll see that later on, because she'll speak about that later in the book. So, don't awaken love until it's pleasing, until it's right. Passions, once inflamed, are hard to control. It's been said a fire in the fireplace is pleasant, but a house on fire isn't. Marriage is a lifelong commitment. Sexual pleasure within it is part of the relationship. But when all you know about that person is sex, you don't know that person. Guys don't need to know your dreams. Guys don't need to know your plans. Guys don't need to know your friendships. Guys don't need to know anything about you except if you're available. Be aware of that, because even the nicest guy can give himself over to the desire. She's warning her friends, don't awaken love until it's right, until it pleases. But that's a warning to us today too. Solomon is handsome. I desire him to hold me. But don't get too close until you're married. Then at that place, that's the best place. You can have love, a commitment, a covenant, perhaps produce children, live together, and enjoy your life under God, blessed by him.